This conference will now be recorded.
His surgery was on the 41st birthday, and he never went back to work because he has neuropathy, cognitive issues, and now he's 57. You know, and the quality of life and the quantity of life. I mean, he's grateful he's still here because he was given 24 to 30 months. But, you know, there's a lot of issues that will stem with your 9/11 victims that.
Oh, God, yes.
So anyway.
Peggy, do you want to get under?
Yeah, let's get started and hopefully others will join. I'm pushing out.
Okay, so we are recording this, and it will be posted on the ANCAN YouTube website, and I'll give Peggy the URL to circulate, and so everybody can listen again, and those who can't make the conference will be able to enjoy the fruits of Councillor Barasch's labors later on. I should introduce myself. My name's Rick Davis, and I run an organization called ANCAN, and we host virtual support groups, one of which I'm delighted to say is this terrific partnership that we have with Male Breast Cancer Coalition, which has been a pleasure, I think, for both of us to work together.
It is. And we couldn't do this without ANCAN. There are our great partners. We can't thank you enough, Rick.
I just want to mention for the men on this call that we have a couple of other calls other than the breast cancer call that might be of interest. We have a call for all men, all cancers, called Speaking Freely, which is essentially a call to talk about everything except treatment. So we don't talk about BRCA, and we don't talk about HER, and we don't talk about triple net, and we don't talk about radiation. We talk about all the things that bother you that you don't really know who to talk with about, and that's a men-only call. And Peggy's aware of it, and we'll let you know. But we welcome all the male breast cancer guys on that call. And the other call we have, maybe for somebody like Linda, is an advanced caregivers call. So we have a call twice a month for advanced cancer caregivers of all types of cancer. And again, caregivers for the male breast cancer group are very, very welcome. And with that, I'll pass it over to Peggy.
Well, we thank everybody who's on the call for being on the call, but we did get several of them that were at work or had a conflict, so they're going to watch the recording. So we can't thank everybody enough for being on the call, especially Michael and Rick, to get this going for us all. So we can get started and go from here.
So is that my cue?
That's your cue. We introduced Michael Barasch.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Michael Barasch. I'm an attorney here in downtown Manhattan. My law firm represents approximately 14,000 people in the 9/11 community. And I'll give you a little bit of background. When 9/11 happened, as many of you may remember, Christy Todd Whitman of the EPA infamously assured everybody that the air is safe. Well, unfortunately, it was not safe. A few years later, my client, Detective James Zadroga, an NYPD detective, he had severe pulmonary fibrosis, which, as Dr. Bard will tell you, is just an insidious pulmonary illness. And in 2006, his last visit to my office, he was so weak that his 4-year-old daughter had to change his oxygen container because he couldn't do it himself. So he died. And in the state of New Jersey, when someone at age 34 dies, it's so unusual, they did an autopsy. And in his lung tissue, they found ground glass, asbestos, chromium, lead, benzene. These are all known carcinogens, and certainly not the stuff that you get, in your DNA testing. I mean, what's ground glass doing in your lungs? What's asbestos doing there? So that was the evidence. The doctors actually in New Jersey officially stated that his death, his pulmonary fibrosis and death, were due to exposure to toxins. And the only place he had ever been exposed to toxins was at the World Trade Center site. So that was the evidence that NIOSH and the CDC needed. And in 2013, and again later the next year, they officially added 68 cancers to the World Trade Center toxins. And Congress had passed the James Zadroga Health and Compensation Act. And that in 2011, that created the World Trade Center Health Program and the Victim Compensation Fund. Sadly, they didn't fund it enough, because those of you who may have seen the news this week with Jon Stewart and with me in Washington now know we're woefully short of funding, because thousands of people have already died from this 9/11 toxic exposure. Thousands more have had certified illnesses, not just respiratory, but 68 cancers have been linked to the toxins, including breast cancer. So you want to take a guess what the most common cancer is that has been linked to the World Trade Center toxins? Anybody?
Are you there, Linda? Yeah, but we couldn't hear you.
Male breast cancer.
Oh yeah, male breast cancer. Thank you, Bob.
It's in the top 5, but it's not number 1. The number 1 cancer link is skin cancer, actually, because the pH level of the dust that everyone was inhaling was also on the single biggest organ that we all have, which is our skin. And those of you who were in New York back then know it was such a beautiful September. So everybody's walking around, you know, in T-shirts, or certainly not with hazmat gear. And, you know, with the EPA having assured us that the air was safe, they reopened Stuyvesant High School 3 weeks later after having used its lobby as a makeshift morgue. The subways are open. They wanted to reopen Wall Street. That was the key thing. I mean, imagine what it would have done to our economy if they had closed down Wall Street. So kids went back to school. People like me, we reopened our law firms. The people at Goldman Sachs, everybody's back to work. And those buildings were on fire for 99 days.
Wow.
So, and it was so hot, people are just all the responders were just wearing shorts and T-shirts. They weren't wearing hazmat gear. They weren't wearing masks, because they were looking for bodies, and you can't communicate with masks on. So they had the most direct exposure. So after squamous cell and basal cell cancer and melanoma being the 3 skin cancers, then the most common cancer among men is prostate cancer. And by far, the most common cancer among women is breast cancer. Wow. Then thyroid cancer, lung cancer, kidney cancer, the list goes on and on. But you know, they tested the pH level of the dust, and it was the same pH level as Drano. So it's no surprise that now you're seeing this incredible outbreak of all these cancers. So I mentioned breast cancer for women. I have to confess my ignorance. I didn't even know men could get breast cancer. I never heard of it. I've never met anybody with it. And in fact, those of you who are watching can attest to this. There's a real, embarrassment among men. And it takes a lot for a guy to come out and say, yeah, I have what's perceived to be a woman's disease. So, you know, Dr. Barr just corrected me before we started recording. I always thought the reason why men's breast cancer is so rare and why the morbidity is almost double that of women is because men are idiots, and we don't do our self-examinations. We don't go to a gynecologist. We don't do testing the way women do and are trained to do since they're teenage girls. But in any case, my law firm alone now represents 32 men with breast cancer. I mean, it's truly heartbreaking, and I'm so blessed to be able to help these guys get free health care from the World Trade Center Health Program and compensation from the Victim Compensation Fund. So those of you who are out there, and I never mind talking to a relatively small group, because I'm hoping that you will help me spread the word to anyone you know who either was a downtown resident, an office worker. There were 300,000 people working in the 9/11 community below Canal Street in Lower Manhattan. There were about 28,000 people living in Tribeca and Wall Street back in 9/11. And then, of course, there were 90,000 responders. So altogether, you're talking about approximately 450,000 people, roughly the size of the population of Tampa or New Orleans. And so many of these people have moved away from the New York area since 9/11. Certainly, most of the students no longer live around here. So if you have developed cancer, say in 2008 or 2011, why in the world would you connect the dots to that 2 weeks you were exposed back in 2001 or 2002? They officially declared everything cleaned up in May of 2002. So that's an 8-month period of which the buildings were on fire for 3 months. And I just implore you, upon all your community and your friends, just make sure you help spread the word. Tell people, hey, there's a presumption that if you had cancer, especially male breast cancer, which is so rare, but they have linked all these other cancers. And as a matter of fact, one of the doctors at the health program called it cancer on steroids, because we're seeing multiple cancers in people in the 9/11 community. And I mean, frankly, not a day goes by without one of my clients dying. It's really horrifying. And what's even more sad to me is when people don't know, oh my God, they were entitled to free health care. Because I certainly don't have to tell your audience that cancer, it can bankrupt a family, even with health insurance. So
Yep.
the World Trade Center Health Program was created by the government to kind of make up for the fact that the EPA misled us. And they did the right thing by creating the health program and the victim fund. But now, as I mentioned earlier, the Victim Compensation Fund is running out of money. So I don't know how many of you saw the news with Jon Stewart in Washington on Monday. You didn't see the news, even though I was there. They weren't focused on me. They're focused on the celebrities. Thank God for Jon Stewart for shining a light on this. And I'm hopeful. As I said, we got to convince 12 more Republican senators to support us to extend and fully fund this Victim Compensation Fund, because so many people have been getting cancer and so many people have been dying that the special master just announced that all awards must be cut 50% and all new claims must be cut 70%.
Wow.
That's how many people are getting sick and dying. So that's a basic overview of what we're doing and helping people sign up for the health program and get the word out and doing outreach to people. That's why I was so pleased that Rick and Peggy asked me to join today. Just make sure anybody you know who is sick or who has passed away, because it's not too late if their loved ones passed away. They can still make a claim. So, again, just spread the word. Any questions?
Well,
This is
well,
wonderful.
let me make a comment, because you've touched on something that people don't know about the effects and moved away. Now, a couple of months ago, I had a fellow in. They come in from California once every year for prostate checkups, and he had low-grade prostate cancer, so we just watched it. And then I just mentioned that men are getting breast cancer from 911. And then he said, you know something? The day after the attack, the U.S. Marines, he was one of the top executives in New York in broadcasting. The Marines brought him personally, physically, down to see the site so there wouldn't be any misreporting of facts. So the point is, people don't know that they've been exposed.
Right.
That's true. And we have many men from Camp Lejeune that they lived on the base for, 1952 to 1982 that don't even have a clue why they got cancer. And they finally realized, like one of our guys, Mike Partey, he was born at Camp Lejeune. neither of his parents, they all lived on base, but neither of the parents got cancers, still to this day. But he's now 12-year breast cancer survivor as a baby being born. So that is what could continue to happen here with the 911.
Yeah. If I can add, you just made me realize this, and I want to make sure people know this. So living in New York, you're kind of in a bubble, like I guess you are everywhere. But when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans,
right,
New York firefighters and cops rushed down to New Orleans to help out. When there was a terrible hurricane in Florida and then in Puerto Rico, New York rescue workers went there.
so
Guess what? When 911, when World Trade Center was attacked, search and rescue guys, firefighters, and police officers came from all over the country, construction workers from all over to help out in the debris removal long after it was no longer a rescue operation, but it had turned into a rescue and recovery operation because the loved ones just wanted to get back the remains of those who had died. People came from all over the country. They were breathing the buildings while they were on fire. They're breathing all that dust. And when they returned home to Missouri, Indianapolis, California, they brought with them the same toxins in their lungs that Detective Zed Roga had and were found in his lungs after his autopsy. So that's why it's so important for people to know there's a presumption. I know there's the BRCA gene test and all that. Doesn't matter. The presumption by the health program and NIOSH is that if you died from one of these 68 cancers or you have one of these 68 cancers, it was caused by your time in New York. So please, and there are health programs in every state in this country.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, Michael. Like the Camp Lejeune guys, genetically or however, I may not know, their kids they have the chance from the contamination now to get these cancers anytime in their lifetime. Is that going to be the same fact from the 9/11?
Well, I'd let Dr. Bard answer that from a medical point of view. I can tell you from the Victim Compensation Fund, the Department of Justice that runs the Victim Compensation Fund will not give any compensation to the offspring of people who are sick. And Doctor, what do you have to say about that?
Well, first, let me backtrack to, again, your first comment that the three skin cancers, basal cell squamous and melanoma, are the most common. I didn't realize that. You know, I understood toxins cause bladder cancer and, of course, prostate cancer, but we've learned since at least 15 years ago that there are certain kinds of basal cell skin cancers that metastasize to the breast. And this may be related because nobody's made the question, the link between pollutants and basal cell cancers going inside the breast, because they would enter through the pores in the nipple anyway.
Right.
This is an area of investigation. Very interesting.
Right. And you mentioned the nipple. I just have to tell you, so many men, when I asked them, how did you first find out, or what made you go to the doctor after, was there something unusual? And they said, oh, my wife noticed that my nipple was inverted.
Right.
I never heard that, but women, I'm sure, are aware that that's a sign. To the men, I have no idea about that. So that's something people should be aware of.
Yeah, I've posted our breast self-exam cards on our chat here, but all of our men know about it, giving the symptoms for men and for women to look
Itchy
for.
Nipples, inverted nipples, and then, of course, lumps, which all men think at the beginning, oh, I just strained my pectoral muscle, worked out in the gym.
Very true.
I told you, we're idiots. We're basically idiots.
Well, I wouldn't say that. You just don't like going to doctors. With 3 sons and a husband, unless they're dying, will they make a call and say, Mom, would you get me an appointment? I know they're really sick at that point.
As Dr. Bard will tell you, I am now, because I went to see him, I am now very much afraid because I'm only 2 blocks from ground zero. So I'm not ignoring anything anymore.
That's better to be proactive, guys. I'd let our doctor say it's nothing. That's the best thing. Yep. But like I said, we heard it for 7 years, and you don't blame the medical profession on it. Guess what? Nobody got it. And I tell some of the survivors we have in other countries, well, our country doesn't even know about this. And I said, well, welcome to the world, because even the U.S., other countries still just don't get it. And that's what we're here to do, spread the message.
No.
Someone asked you.
Michael, I have a question for you because on a state level, I was at a summit on Tuesday for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network in California, and I asked the people that work with the legislators, that work for the bills and everything in Sacramento, if our state is planning on doing anything for first responders that were at 9/11, or right now too, California fires might end up having some of the same issues because of toxins that are burned in the fires.
Mhm.
And they sort of acted like, no, we don't know. So is it going to be more of always a federal level thing, or should we fight for our states as well? I think we should fight for our states as well, but I'm asking, is that sort of a
Where are you in California, by the way?
by SFO, 15 miles south of San Francisco.
So I was invited to speak at the Firefighter Cancer Support Network meeting in Pasadena in November while the wildfires were burning. And I wanted to tell it because a lot of people from California are in FEMA's search and rescue group. And they had no idea that the federal government had created this presumption and this health program and victim compensation fund for them. And even though they may have been in 87 fires, including wildfires, if they were in New York for any part of the 8-month period after 9/11, they have the right to make a claim to the federal victim compensation fund. So thank you for asking that question. And by the way, I just wanted to round out, I'm going to hold this up for if you can see it, but I'll read it for those who aren't on the web. The most common cancers are basal cell, squamous cell, and melanoma, then prostate cancer, breast cancer, thyroid cancer, blood cancers, which are lymphoma and leukemia, lung cancer, kidney cancer, colon cancer, bladder cancer, and then under the rubric of rare cancers. So those are the top 10. And then, of course, there are many non-serious pulmonary illnesses, such as pulmonary fibrosis, which is what Detective Zed Roga had, sarcoidosis. Those are the most serious of the non-cancerous respiratory illnesses.
Yeah, and I shared that through
Michael,
email to everyone, both of those pages. So
Hi,
you'll check.
Michael.
Go
This
ahead.
is Phil Pilato. I just have a question for you.
Sure.
I had developed the breast cancer in 2010. My mother had breast cancer, and so, I had assumed that I'd gotten it from her genes, but the BRCA test proved negative. The type of breast cancer that I had is actually different than hers. And I think I saw you on one of the news programs about this, and I called your firm, actually, was trying to get a hold of you because on 9/11, I was on the roof of my building when the towers collapsed, and this huge cloud of smoke, of debris just came floating over the East River, and I got a lung full of it before I was able to jump down, myself and my neighbors, before I was able to jump down. And I never connected the two, but I have a strange feeling now after all of this.
Bill, where did you live?
Probably, in Park Slope in Brooklyn.
Right. So, okay. This is like everything else that the government does. It's a political compromise. So what they ended up coming up with NIOSH's help is that to be eligible for the World Trade Center health program and all the benefits. So your primary insurance company pays your bills, but all the deductibles and the co-pays are paid by the health program, which is a wonderful thing. You had to have been south of Houston Street in Manhattan or in Western Brooklyn. So Park Slope may very well be considered Western Brooklyn, and you should call up the health program to see if you're eligible for that. But to be eligible for compensation, you must prove that you were south of Canal Street, which is about a mile even further south than Houston Street. And you have to prove that you were either caught in the dust cloud on 9/11 or you were there for 4 hours between 9/11 and September 14th, or 24 hours during the month of September, or 80 hours between September 11th and May 30th, 2002. But again, you would have to prove that you either worked or lived south of Canal Street to be eligible for the compensation, okay?
Right. I agree with you on that. That's what I think Jennifer and your law firm had told me. But one of the things that's interesting is my girlfriend also has breast cancer. She lived in Brooklyn Heights at the time of 9/11 on Henry Street.
Right.
And she got a law firm that told her that the debris was being trucked past her house for months on end. And so she's actually qualified now she's actually certified for the health program.
Well, that's great. But just because you're certified by the health program doesn't automatically make you eligible for the Victim Compensation Fund. But if she was on a debris removal route, then you can make that argument.
Right. I think Jennifer had suggested to me that because I did have to go into work and drive past the World Trade Center site every morning.
And you might very well be eligible. You'll need 2 witnesses, though, to attest to the fact that that's the route you took every day and that you were exposed to the toxins for at least 24 hours in the month of September or 80 hours during those 8 months that followed. So, Bill, if you or your girlfriend want to call me privately tomorrow, that's totally fine, okay? I'd love to talk to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Okay.
So this is Rick, Michael. For those of us who don't really know what this eligibility qualifies you for, and for those listening, can you tell us if you do qualify, what you might receive if we spoke to you?
Great, thank you. I know that you did tell me that's how we were going to end, and this is perfect timing. So once you're found eligible or certified by the World Trade Center Health Program for a physical illness, and I'll talk about PTSD in a minute, but if you're certified with a physical illness, then you're entitled to compensation from the Victim Compensation Fund. And there's a presumption that if you have been certified, you're entitled to $250,000 for your cancer. You get less for basal cell and squamous cell cancer, but every other cancer is $250,000. And I hope you don't mind if I talk frankly, but a lot of people are dying from these cancers. If you die from a 9/11 related cancer, then your estate is entitled to another $250,000 and more if you have lost income and your family was dependent on that income. So if you were the primary caretaker, the primary breadwinner, and now your wife doesn't have that income or your husband doesn't have that income, you can get more money for lost income. So it's very significant and it's tax-free. But unfortunately, they're not giving anything for mental illness because we couldn't convince Congress that PTSD was a real thing. They said, oh, it's too easy to fake it, only for physical illnesses. And right now, the Victim Compensation Fund is scheduled to close at the end of 2020. So I urge anybody who sees this or anybody who knows that anybody was downtown Manhattan and has cancer or they died of a cancer, get that claim in now because it takes about a year to a year and a half to get an award. And if you have any more questions, there's a host of information on my website. That site is 911victimfund.com. That's 911victimfund.com.
Perfect.
All right. So thank you so much for having me on today. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer it, but I just wanted to get that out there.
That's wonderful. I was going to ask you for that. Sherry, didn't you have a couple of questions? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me add something because what men don't want to do is go to a mammography center to get checked for male breast cancer. But look, men don't want to go to any doctor for any reason. But we had one of the firefighters who came in and he had a lump under his arm, and I was able to tell him with the non-invasive, non-X-ray sonogram, it was a fatty tumor. So this gave him relief because these people die from worry rather than from the tumors. But the other thing is, we also have new non-X-ray technologies for small areas like the nipple and skin in men that can detect cancer. Everything new is coming out of Europe and Japan, but these are non-invasive tests that really find and locate cancer rather quickly. It's a 10-minute office procedure.
Well, Dr. Bard, so when are we going to get this nationally? We need you everywhere. But that would be wonderful. I think Sherry had a question or two from survivors that couldn't be on. Are you on, Sherry?
I'm here.
Okay.
Michael, I did have one question from a gentleman who lives up near Seattle. And he said to me, while he is not asking for specific cancers related to the World Trade Center, he would like to know if there is a list of toxins identified which may be causing cancers in exposed persons.
Yeah, I think you can go to the World Trade Center Health Program to see what toxins were there. I don't know if you were tuned in when I told you what the doctors found in James Zadroga's lung tissue when they did his autopsy, but they included benzene, chromium, lead, asbestos. I mean, it was all the remnants of jet fuel, diesel fuel. So it was a real toxic brew, and they've never seen a mix like this before that was literally cooking for 99 days. I mean, one of the things that someone said to me that I thought was so powerful, they didn't find one computer or phone in the World Trade Center debris. It had all burned up, and those plastics are filled with toxins. One of the World Trade Center was coated with asbestos, so it would never burn. So, I mean, you can imagine it's a total mess, but I'm sure you can get that information online.
Okay, wonderful. I'll let him know.
Any other questions for Michael? Or?
Well, one other comment, since you mentioned pulmonary disease, we do sonograms on the lung now for pulmonary disease, mesothelioma, the pleural thickening, but it can go and see the chronic pulmonary fibrosis diseases now. As a matter of fact, the American medical system said you can't do it, except there's a doctor I work with 2 blocks from my office who wrote a textbook on ultrasound of the lung 10 years ago. So this is being done. It's just not appreciated. So this needs to be disseminated throughout the states.
Right. Yep, that's good news. All right, guys, I have to run. I have to go give a speech at the UFT now, the Teachers Association. But I want to thank you for having me on. Anytime you want me to come back, it'll be my pleasure. Peggy and Rick, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for helping me spread the word. Goodbye, everybody.
God bless you, Michael. Thank you. We can't thank you enough, and everybody who joined. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rick and Cam. We can't thank you enough for always helping us out, darling.
It's our pleasure. It's our
Thank
pleasure.
you, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
And remember, men have breasts too.
They do.
Becky, did you see my license plate frame?
Yes, I love it.
That's men have breasts too. Yeah.
I love it. We love your license plate. We just got ours in too, so I'm getting those ready to take a picture with. So it's perfect.
Did you put ours online?
Yeah, it's online on all of our pages and social media.
I never looked or anything, so I didn't know.
Well,
Yeah.
Linda will show it to you.
Good.
Well, thanks, Peggy.
Yeah. They're really bright pink. Now Linda says I can't be flipping nobody
There's
off or
Bob.
nothing anymore.
That's right. They're going to know you.
I
Yeah.
said he has to drive responsibly now.
I love it. You too. We'll see y'all soon. And remember, we have our conference coming up April 26th through the 28th. We want everybody there, God willing.
I talked to Sherry earlier about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
We'll see you then.
We love you. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye, Rick.
Bye-bye.